given where you are, and I'm honored that you're here. Been signed up with Ally for 10 years myself. I think what one of the things that most people at home want to know is what are some of the steps that we can take collectively to close the racial wealth gap. And the reason why I ask that, not many people are inside the industry and have the lens that you do. So what are some steps that we can take to begin to close that gap, um, given your insights over the past few years?
Yeah, it's a tough question. And one of the things that I always tell people is every time I look at that problem, I respect the problem. You got to respect the problem, right? Like you can't do throwaway statements as to how that's going to be resolved. And so I think it's going to be a combination of things, whether it's policy, right, which is why we have to represent ourselves in our communities and in terms of what policies we support. Comes in policy. It comes in terms of what kind of sort of exposure we give people of color, particularly Black and Brown folks, who are the ones who don't necessarily have that dinner table, that proverbial dinner table that's talked about in terms of being money and investing being spoken about, right? One of the things you find over and over in studies is that the common thread, the two major common threads of people who do okay when they retire. That doesn't mean they've got like they're rich, right? That it just means they have something to supplement their retirement, right? The two most common threads. One, money's been talked about in their lives at their dinner table since they were yay old, right? I don't mean just money, how important money is. I'm not talking superficial stuff about money, right? I'm talking about money in the sense of like what it does, what kind of choices it powers, what kind of choices it can amplify, right? How you make it, as you're teaching me and all the time, right? Like how you use your sweat equity and your knowledge to earn that money in different ways, including the markets. And so one is the dinner table, the proverbial dinner table. Mm-hmm. The second that you hear a lot about is the early start of whether it's your 401k when you start right out of school, right? When the first job you have, making sure you hit that match, that the company never leave money on the table, right? Max that you can. The early start of automated investing. There's something about like taking out, like you pretend that it doesn't even exist in your income. Yeah. Put it somewhere in your 401k. And then when you get a little older, maybe it becomes an IRA to accompany that. And then after that, you maybe have a different other tax-free vehicles that you start using, whether it's your healthcare program that your employer might have, where you have a health account that you can use as a tax-free means of growing your wealth. So the first is the table setting. And then the second is that early habit of just pretending a certain percentage of your income is not yours and making sure you put it away. So now, how does that two little things make a difference in such a massive thing? Well, I think that ultimately, there's something powerful about taking a big problem, making it smaller, and then teaching small lessons out of that. I'm actually a believer and a proponent that big problems require us to make them smaller, to make some headway in them. And then once you make some headway in it, you create habits. Representation matters. Like people like us looking like we can do that, right? I can talk about stocks and you can talk about investing in crypto or whatever else your expertise is. Yeah. There's something about that. When culture represents you, there's a permission that takes place that says, I too can do that. It's not just a white people game or an XYJ game. I too, my people can also do that, right? So part of it is continuously being a proponent of those small habits that all of us have at our disposal. You don't need to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth to say, if I make $1,000 a month, I will pretend $50 of that doesn't exist, right? And put it into the habit of an IRA or a 401k if you're employed. You don't need to be a person who's born with a silver spoon in their mouth to know that to open a brokerage account requires $0 nowadays. There are no barriers to entry for you to partake and understand. You don't need to be born with an uncle connected to such and such to know that a robo can be invested in with almost $10. And back to your lessons, you don't need to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth to start to partake in earnest in markets. So I think part of it is just making sure that our people know that this is not as inaccessible as they think, but we need to make sure that we decode the language in a way that makes it accessible. Does that solve it all? No. Is it a massive, sexy policy fix? No. I just believe my gut that it is making a problem smaller and then repeating it over and over, that solution that is really important, much like you guys are doing, right? You focused on education and knowledge as that fulcrum with which you want to make change on.
Honestly, is it too late to close the gap?
Is it too late to close the gap? Tell that to our, the forefathers that worked and slaved away to make it possible for you and me to sit here. Tell that to them.
Yeah.
We don't have time for cynicism, brother.
I love it. Thank you.
People spilt a lot of blood and a lot of sweat for us not to carry on with the mission. So I don't even waste time on that. I have every day wake up, and the mission is to spread the knowledge and to make sure that more people enter the room that look different.
No, absolutely. Let me ask you this. So you are the Ally Invest president, and we see that a bunch of banks are starting to allow people to purchase Bitcoin. And a lot of banks are getting into the Bitcoin space and the cryptocurrency space, digital assets. So what is Ally's stance on cryptocurrency? And what is your personal opinion on the regulation of cryptocurrency now that banks are getting involved in it, and obviously the political games that's being played and things of that nature? So what's your take on crypto?
Yeah. So I have a different take on crypto. One, because as you know, I'm employed by a bank. So it has a different, even though I run the investment side of the business, at the end of the day, I'm also regulated by the Fed ultimately, right? So there are ways that we have to be careful for good reasons. We talk about crypto. So the way I approach crypto is from an intellectual curiosity perspective, not just an investment perspective. What I mean by that is, at the end of the day, every innovation, whether it's blockchain, and it's a subsequence of that being crypto, obviously, or other forms of digital currency when fiats become more digitized, at the end of the day, every innovation should make an investor curious and interested, period. The capital markets, if they're nothing else, are about the ability to understand where future growth is coming, right? So ultimately, I feel very strongly that you have to be curious and interested in crypto and blockchain to best understand it, because there's no doubt about it, this technology is pretty transformative, right? So in terms of the currency itself, I often, when I write about it, and I've done a few pieces on crypto as well as blockchain, it's more of encouraging people to make sure that they don't look at it as this panacea that solves everything, but they don't also become the cynic that says, it's just a fake thing that's going to go away. I have no time for both sides of the equation. I think we all have to be intellectually curious. We should look at our own investment situation, right? Look at our own financial situation, and be curious in several ways. One could be education. Another one could be taking a percentage of our assets and investing and trying out. Trying out in small amounts and investing is key. Investing is a practiced art, as Ian has been talking to you guys. And Ian, brother, your name is Ian, right? I'm hoping I'm not calling you a wrong name. Yes. But investing is a practiced art. If you're nervous, try it a little bit. Don't put a whole lot in it because you might get burnt, right? But it's a practiced art. And the other part of it is it's an endurance art. Mm-hmm. If you get freaked out and you go away when the party's over, you have lost the lesson of investing. You got to stick around for the loss and the downside to know how to perfect your craft so that you're smarter about where prices are at the next time around, right? So ultimately, I feel that crypto is a really interesting space. Digital currencies are a really interesting space. And one, like every other investment, you should be balanced about how you look at it. There's speculative nature to it, no doubt. But there's also this transformative nature of it that you also have to be curious and potentially try out.
My graduates from my school being Forbes, bag drop.
Bag drop.
A mic drop, bag drop.
Bag drop.